Good day, everyone, and welcome to our Learning Skills Diagnosis webinar series. For the discussion this afternoon, our topic will be Early Literacy Diagnosis, Identifying Strengths and Weaknesses on Decoding. Before we begin, Take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.wibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions in the comment box allotted during the session and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kabibal. And now to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker. Mr. Glenn S. Mirabete currently serves as a biology and research faculty at Far Eastern University, Manila, where he teaches several STEM subjects such as General Biology 1 and 2, Earth and Life Sciences, Statistics and Probability, Practical Research 2, and Inquiries, Investigation, and Immersions. He also served as a faculty point person in biology and research head of the school. Aside from being a teacher, he extends professional work as a writer and editor in publishing house, seasoned lecturer in review centers, and a resource person to seminars and workshops. Mr. Mirabete obtained his Bachelor of Science education in biology at the Philippine Normal University, Manila, and his Master of Arts of Education at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He is a licensed professional teacher and a civil service examiner passer for professional level. He also took short courses in biosafety and biosecurity and the perspective on poverty and well-being at the University of the Philippines, Manila and Ateneo de Manila University, respectively. On the personal side, Mr. Mirabete is also engaged in participating to different youth initiatives and activities in the country. He was chosen as a youth representative for the Global Youth Summit 2018 that is concerned with the achievement of SDG 16 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. He also enjoyed volunteering work for environmental protection and climate change of Greenpeace PH. Moreover, he's a mental health advocate and member of Youth for Mental Health Coalition that strongly supports the full implementation of mental health law in the country. Aside from teaching work, he is also an active member of various professional organizations in the country, such as Biology Teachers Association of the Philippines Incorporation, Asia Pacific Consortium of Researchers and Educators, Philippine Communication Society, Philippine Educational Measurement and Evaluation Association Incorporation, Philippines Association Mixed Method Researchers and Emerging Scholars, and the Philippine Association of Teacher Education. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Glenn Mirabete.
Hello, and hello, teachers. Welcome to afternoon session for the Vivals group live learning session here at YouTube. So, as mentioned, you can share this session using the hashtag LearnAs1PH to your colleagues and to other teachers. Yan. So I hope that you are seeing my screen now. So for this session, good afternoon, by the way. So I'm Sir Glenn. So I'm also a teacher by profession. So thank you so much for the second opportunity and also this session that I will be giving you, especially for the advices for teachers in the making and also for the professional teachers in the field. And we know that we are in this struggling world because of the current scenarios that we are doing right now. But I believe that we can really overcome the challenges that amidst the situations. So we have here to do to all. I encourage all teachers to participate in the live sessions. So there will be posted questions to be given during the session. Okay. So I also actually appreciate if you will have some questions about the learning skills of students, right? So yeah. Okay, so as mentioned, so we have here the early literacy diagnosis, so identifying strengths and weaknesses in decoding. Okay. So, by the way, I'm Sir Glenn. So, September 8, 2020. So, that's 2 p.m. Thank you so much for joining me for this session. Okay. So, for the flow of the discussion, so we have here the reading and literacy. Okay. Second, we have here the decoding strategies. Third one, we have weaknesses in decoding, and we have the interventions. Um, we have here the interventions to students. Okay. So one by one, we'll be dealing with one of them. Okay. So so let me start with this phrase that reading is the key to learning. Okay. We know that it all boils down to having this receptive skill or the receptive attitude by which we want the students to learn something or benefit from reading. Okay. And for reading is really that important matter because we know that the students to learn something, they have to read something. Okay. And by reading, we mean to say that we use words or phrases and also starting to learn how to read. But definitely for students or for child or children, they do not know how to read. That's why for us teachers, we learn how to take students to higher level, just like in the usual listening, right? So these are the receptive skills, just like your listening and speaking. Then later on, the students will be given the time to learn something just like a reading and the writing. Okay, and for us to make students benefit from that experience, then they really have to read. And our task as teachers is to make students realize the joy of reading. Okay, then let me have this discussion about numeracy and literacy. So we mean to say that Department of Education has this objective to make learning fruitful by having the functional literacy and the functional numeracy. When we talk about the literacy, that talks about the narratives, right, or the text, because that's the only way that we communicate, right, with the use of text, right. Then we also had the numeracy, use of numbers to communicate the variables, etc. But this one, we have this process by which the children must learn the numerics and also the text. Okay? So for the concern of literacy, that means about reading. Okay? And also the recognition of words, the phrases. Okay? And also for the numeracy, that's also the part by which we have the numbers, the performance of basic operations, and other operations such as parentheses, etc. Okay? Then we meant to say about literacy because our topic is literacy diagnosis. Okay? So something that we have in mind about literacy. Okay? When we mean about literacy, we means about speaking and also engagement to written materials for us to what? To understand what it means about. Okay? So that's what we mean about literacy. But accordingly, women literacy has been traditionally regarded as having to do with the ability to read and write. So it's not about the receptive skills that the child learns during youngs, right? So for example, listening and speaking, so those are the skills that the child learn even by just observing, right? But for the functions of school and also the parents, we have also the reading and writing. Those are the productive skills. And for us, for them to benefit from the educational arena or learning experiences, they must have the so-called reading and writing. Okay, it all boils down with reading because from what they read, they will be able to translate them into words, into writing. Okay, and for literacy, regardless of the ability to read and write. Okay, but definitely there are changes when it comes to literacy. So more recently, literacy has evolved to encompass multidimensional abilities such as listening, speaking, viewing, and performing. So this one, we have already six facets or six phases of literacy. So that means reading, writing, listening, speaking, viewing, and performing, along with cultural and societal factors that can facilitate or constrain literacy development. So it's not about these skills alone, right? But definitely we're talking about the environmental factors or the things that influence or events that influence the child to learn something. Okay, so maybe we can say that, for example, for a child having a supportive environment, they will readily know how to achieve literacy because they have enough materials, they have supporting parents, they were in a particular school who benefits learning, etc. But for the societal factors, for example, if the child is having deficit or shortcomings when it comes to materials, books, and also the access to schools, definitely that will be affected also. Especially for those students who are in far-flung areas, we cannot just tell them that, oh, you're not doing anything for this. But definitely it's the far-flung area, okay? So they don't have the capacity to go in school because they want to attend to their means of living. And something that might affect eventually their literacy because they don't have the opportunity to learn something from them. Okay, that's why we have six facets plus the cultural and societal factors. So that's what we mean. We have the literacy, okay, that can constrain also that literacy development. Okay, so actually the reading and literacy are intertwined in such a way that reading is not natural part of human being. So children do not automatically learn how to read or need to be taught to read. So for us to realize something that for us, we need to learn from the basics. And also, we need to teach the children or students or early readers from the basics. Okay? Then effective reading strategies range from visualizing and questioning to pre-reading and decoding. Reading strategies are used to help students to become efficient readers. And many of these reading strategies are foundational and must be taught and mastered by the student before other strategies can be effective. And we know the really important role of reading and literacy when it comes to development, not just to the point of mastery, but also for understanding something because the goal of learning is to understand things or concepts, okay, before students can master it. So that for us to make students benefit from the materials that we are about to let them discover or to let them know the beauty of something, we need to take action and make reading skills fruitful for them. And by telling them that reading is really important is through having supportive environment and at the same time strategies on how to make effective reading. Kasi, if it's just reading alone, they just reading, but there's no understanding, right? But for this one, for reading, comes with understanding that becomes meaningful, right? So that's the overall essence of literacy when it comes to reading. That reading is a foundation to make the students literate to all facets of life. Okay? Let's just study about the foundations of reading. Okay? So for this one, I'll be using the modern schema theory. What do you mean by schema? It means what? It means the prior knowledge or experiences. So this one's a proponent of Frederick Bartlett and David Rumelhart. So the schema theory is an explanation of how readers use prior knowledge to comprehend and learn it from the text. So basically, it does not boil down from the material itself because the students must have prior knowledge of what they are reading about, what they are talking about, so that they create mental images. That's what we term it. Well, when we read something, we create mental images to narrate while reading something, material. And this can be achieved by having prior knowledge. So, for example, all things bright and beautiful. So, if you don't have the mental image for that, you cannot just say that, oh, all things bright and beautiful. So, you cannot create mental image that things are really beautiful. Okay, because we know the definition of bright, we know the definition of beautiful, we know the definition of thing. That's why we make coherence of words forming a whole thing. Therefore, this is a modern schema theory. Okay, so that leads also to understanding. So according to schema theory, comprehending a text is an interactive process between the reader's background knowledge and the text. So efficient comprehension requires the ability to relate the textual material to one's own knowledge. So meaning to say, we have prior knowledge of words or phrases. And what we're going to do is to create mental image based on reading the material. Okay, so for example, if we had the things that the hungry mouse, something like that. So you will just imagine a mouse that is hungry na nakahawak sa tiyan, something like that. So that means to say that you know what is a rat, right? And you know the feeling of hungry. No? So pag ganun po yung ating situation, ganun po ang ating nabasa, we all mean that we know how to visualize things. We translate words into mental images. Okay, so that's what we mean about the prior knowledge. Therefore, the modern schema theory. But if the child has no prior knowledge of something, they don't have exposure. Therefore, they cannot understand the thing because they don't experience that thing. Okay, so reading or understanding will be difficult for them. Okay. So we also have the neuropsychology of reading. So what are the things that we have to consider for this? For the neuropsychology of reading, it means to say that there are many brain areas involved in reading competency, even even at the basic word reading level. So problems in one or more of these areas of the brain could lead to reading disabilities. Okay? So, you know, this is the sagittal section of our brain. So we have the temporal lobe, we have the dorsolateral cortex. So for this one, as you can see, for the gyrus, the phoneme grapheme correspondence, and also the occipital temporal for grapheme and symbolic representation. For Broca's area, it means sequencing, then inferior, sightworks, and basal ganglia, with about sequencing and working memory. So it all boils down that we have areas in our brain that concern about reading. And not just about reading, but also understanding the absorption, right? So other areas of our brain are working to make the learning possible. Okay? So do not just underestimate the power of brain because it controls the body. Sabi nga nila, mawalan ka na ng arms and legs, wag lang ang brain. Because, you know, for the brain is really a powerful tool for us to understand the myths of the human body. Okay? So I just want to have this question before we move on with the basics of the decoding. because we're done with the literacy. We know the foundations of reading, that reading is really the interactive purpose of the readers and also the text material by creating mental images. We also know the probabilities or possibilities of using reading for understanding something. But I know that you have something in mind in creating strategies in teaching literacy to students or readers. So I want you to answer this question by typing on the chat box or comment section. So what are some strategies that you did in teaching literacy to readers and the students? We know that we have various strategies not found in books or what, but something that we just found out or emerged through the process. Because for us teachers, we are innovating something. We are fond of trial and error thing. So something that we can say that, oh, really, this method is really effective by making them learn to expose to words or phrases, then letting them discover on their own. This is discovery. How about through guided practice, that having words or phrases they listening to this one. That's why for the early stages or for early readers, they have to undergo the process of, you know, exposing to rhythms or music. That's why we have the A, B, C, D, something like that. Because, the association of words into music makes the learning get faster. Okay? So that's why we have nursery rhymes, something like that, and other things, that we want the early readers to do on their behalf, and also that can be facilitated by teachers. It's for all for the glory of teaching students how to read. Okay? And for me, for literacy, I'm just teaching my students to do more the music thing, blended words with music, so that they may understand, they make sense of the word. Then something I want them to realize that, oh, what's the meaning of this? Something like that. So they have the ways on to the curiosity to understand things because they have already formed mental curiosity about those words. Okay. So we also have the so-called the decoding strategies. So we mean about decoding, coding, decoding, coding. So for in this one, for the decoding strategies, these are the early literacy diagnosis. Okay. What do you mean by decoding? So decoding po is a process of translating print into speech by rapidly matching a letter or combinations of letters, right? That's the graphemes, to their sounds. That's the phonemes. And recognizing the patterns that make syllables and words. There is an area in the brain that deals with language processing and does this process automatically. And we know I already saw you or presented the several areas of the brain that work for the reading and also for the segmenting, for the phonemes, for the words, for the sequencing, the blending, etc. So we meant to say that the decoding is about the recognition by use of certain devices, by use of certain strategies such as graphemes and phonemes. So recognizing patterns that make syllables and words. So yan nga po. So then we also have the processing area, and this one, the interactive context of the reader and also the material. So when the reader reads a material, they absorb this, saying it out loud by having the sound and creating meaning for them. Okay? But for early readers, it's really important to have the first one, the sounds, right? So for this, even naman for kids, right? They learn how to cooing. Yung may iyak sila, something like that. So they learn how to emit the vibrate their cords to make a sound. That's why it's really tantamount for us, or it's really important to facilitate or to have the learning environment of students to become okay or to be educated. Kasi, for students, pag expose sila sa environment na ganito, they tend to learn things in a different way. So, kasi kung ano man yung nakikita nila sa environment nila, yun yung i-play safe nila and regard as tama. That's why we cannot just tell students, sasabihin natin for informal settlers, yung mga ganyan, na okay lang sa kanila yung pagmumura because yun kasi yung kinagis na nila. Meaning to say, yun yung kinagis ng mundo nila nung bata sila. They found regularities on the tone of persons in their environment. That's why they adopted the same thing. That's mura ng mura sila. But they don't feel remorse on that. That's a bad thing, no? Why? Can you scold the child or that person? 5 years old pa lang nagmumura na? No? The answer is for in other environments, no, because they don't feel remorse because that's their way of learning things. Kasi that's yun yung kinagistan nila. And they don't feel sorry for that. Kasi they found regularities. That's the culture. That's the culture they are in. They were raised. That's their upbringing. Okay? But for us, we know that we are in an educated world. When we have the environment supported parents, they learn how to the parents have the role to teach their child that don't talk when your mouth is full, do the blessing, and also kissing elders, then saying po at opo. So that makes them really important for them. Kasi yun na yung nila, yun yung way nila on how to deal with people at tinuruan sila sa tama. So there's the good upbringing. Okay? Now, what's the task of the school if that is the case? So it's so hard to break the cycle if the environment they are exposed to is in their body. Kasi it's in their system na kasi, lalo na kung sila ay pinalaking spoiled, something like that. So, we mean to say na, siguro pinalit dito. Ay, itong nito, pangit ng ugali ng batang to because pinalaki siyang ganito. So it all boils down with the parents and their environment. Okay, enough with that. So we have the early exposure to sounds and letters. We have also this one, they learn from this or paano ko siya relate because through early exposures to sounds and letters. So we have here awareness that speech is composed of the smallest meaningful units of sounds. That's a phoneme. Then awareness that letters, graphemes, and word parts, that's a morpheme, are visual language symbols. So when we talk about the sounds, that's a phoneme. For letters, the grapheme, and for words, a morpheme. Recognition that written letters represent the sounds. So we have here the alphabetic principle. Understanding that phonemes and morphemes can be manipulated. So we have here the segmenting and blending. Okay, so the use of 3 approaches to phonics instruction, this is really the first thing, right? Then the rest, just like of the letters, just like of the words, something that they mimic, meaning ginagaya nila from the people they encounter. That's why the role of media to child development is really important. So kapag exposed sila sa mga ganun, violence, more or less, they will become violent. Because that's how that's their usual thing. Yun lang yung nakikita nila through observation. Can we scold with the child with that? No. Kasi dun sila na-expose eh. So the liability will be given to parents and also to guardians. Kasi kasi sila yung nag-expose sa child sa ganong environment. Okay? So we also have this one, the 3 approaches to phonics instruction. We have the embedded phonics. Phonics skills learned by embedding phonics instruction in text reading, implicit, and relies on incidental learning. We also have the contextualized and meaningful. So for just like the words, the phrases. So words like A, B, C, D, something like that. So analytic phonics teach students to analyze the letter sound relations in known whole words to detect patterns and split into parts. So focus on whole to part word reading, then avoid pronouncing words in isolation, and helps in with avoiding or non-decodable words. So syempre, we mean to streamline the words that we want the students or early readers to learn by having the normal conversation, the words that we use in normal conversation, and not just using highfalutin words. Okay. We also have the synthetic phonics. So teach your students all sounds, then letters, then how to convert letters into sounds, and then blend the sound to form recognizable words. A, B, ba, something like that. So considered an isolated skills approach, they contextualize, often uses multisensory approaches, and often used to stalled readers. So like, we'll be banking on the phonics or the literacy diagnosis in this. Okay. For the literacy diagnosis, okay, so these are some strategies that we can use. Okay, so for the first one, we have to build a strong foundation for phonological awareness first, because when you study the life of a child, they just easily say a word, right? It all starts with the sound. That's why the foundation of words, we have the phonological awareness. Okay? We have the e, e, u. That's why we have here those you know um, lectures with students and early readers. Then that's the time that we see na lang yung graphemes, the letters, that's tapos yun yung letter. Then ba. So research has shown us that effective phonological awareness instruction not only involves instruction in advanced phonemic awareness, but teaching these phonological skills to the point of overlearning and automaticity is the key. Okay, so it's always the first thing, teachers. We want to let our students learn something for literacy, for the learning skills. We need to make them sound just like a the real world. It's not about 100% perfect because we don't mean living in a perfect society, but at least we can do something for the students to learn firsthand. Okay? So teach syllable types and syllables division. Okay? Assigning segments or borders. So when a student is faced with an unknown, so these are the decoding strategies. So when a student is faced with an unknown word, this decoding strategy is often my first step. So by locating vowels, then syllable divisions, and determining syllable types, students are able to break a word into bite sizes. So it's just converting large pieces into small pieces, large chunk to small chunks. Okay. So yeah. So for example, we have here rabbit. So we mean to say this one rabbit. Okay. Rabbit. So we have here the segmented word, okay? So that the students may say, okay, this is how we segment words. This is how it is pronounced, okay? So it's just an early lang naman. Just like um, baby, something like. So we have, pag Filipino naman, bahay. They also have lupa. And that's why when we have the laleli, lolu, papepi, poku. And also, pag sa Filipino naman, it's just a usual thing, right? Magkakaiba lang yung saang, mga, nang, na, tsaka na yung mga grammatical cues na yun. But for the English, so we have to segment this rabbit. Next, we have here marking vowels. It is often to teach students to breathe and macron markings. Markings so that they can mark vowels with correct sound. Saying the vowel sound before attempting to blend the word is also helpful. So we have rabbit. So we mean to say pag ganito pataas siya. So it's on a high intonation. Robot, duet, pumpkin, gumdrop. So yeah. So we have here the marking vowels. So aside from segmenting the words or separating syllables, so we also have marking vowels and how can we separate them and how can we better pronounce them. Okay? It's about phonemes or the sounds. We also want to look for familiar spelling patterns or what. Okay? Looking for familiar spelling patterns such as digraphs, blends, or chunks is also a key skill to aid when decoding words. Students may take connections from known words to new words that share the same spelling pattern. So for example, we have one syllable, two syllables, three syllable words. So pag ganon, you need to let the students practice, so early readers. So we have your kind, mind, blind, right, behind, bald, gold, cold, cold, sold, fold, told. So this one, we're just looking for patterns that only replaces the first letter. So we have cold, sold, fold, told. Okay. So please take note, we're not after with the spelling, but we're after about how the students pronounce the words. Okay. So that means for the decoding. So we also have segmenting and blending. So for segmenting and blending, if a student does not know how to blend, they will not have the necessary skills to decode unknown words. Similarly, the ability to segment a word into sounds is crucial for spelling. So this one, bat, rat, for example. So we have chat, and we have juice. Yeah. We have here the segmenting and blending. Okay. Next, we have here identifying affixes, base roots, base words, and roots. Ayan. So we have to make jumbled letters. Ayan. Reflect, reject, replay, something like that. Okay. So we have here, this understanding is very often key, not only for spelling, but also for pronunciation of words and word parts. This is especially helpful for decoding multisyllabic words. For example, understanding. So we have 4 syllables. For deject or reject, we have phone. We have also braver. We have the kinder. We have to replay. So, ganon. So, we have here identifying the base words and roots. So, this one for decoding also for reading comprehension, we must learn to teach them also the bases or the affixes, prefixes, suffixes, etc. Teach students to use their fingers to mask words and word parts. So teaching students to cover suffixes or syllables with their fingers is an excellent substitute that makes decoding instruction more multisensory and less visually overwhelming. So this one, and brob, grub, prob, trub, flash, clash, glash, slash. Yeah. So this data, we have already the initial SL. This one, the word is ash. We have the slash, the plash, the blash, the clash, the glash. Slut, smut, start, swat. Okay. Set them up for success. Sometimes it is the conglomeration of things that matter. So we need to expose students to experiences that will let them have a thing. Okay. So we have here the thin, the big, pop. So Tim had a red bed in the den. Tim was Meg and Rob's pet. And Meg and Rob had jobs at the Fit Club. Tim got to tug on with them. Okay. So this one, this is an example exercise or sample reading material that we can let the child read. Okay. And there are still a lot of materials that we can use by which students can, can highlight. Okay. So choosing decodable text carefully that is controlled and within the student zone of proximal development. Okay, and we know the proponent of ZPD, this Lev Vygotsky. So choosing fonts and font size carefully can also contribute significantly to a student's success. So this one, through guided practice, no? First thing for learning, we have to model. For us teachers, we read the text. Second, we have the material read by them, but with our guidance through guided practice. Then lastly, that's for independent practice by transferring the learning to students, by letting them learn on their own. So in that case, we are transferring the GRR, or we have the gradual release of responsibility by having the teacher, the model, student teacher, that's the student and the teacher, that's a guided practice, and we also have the students for independent practice. So if that is the case, that's gradual release of responsibility. Okay. But if the students, for example, for the independent practice, they didn't get it fine enough, so you had to return to student and teacher, therefore the guide. Okay. So okay, so we know about the decoding strategies, right? So yung decoding strategies will let us identify or let us teach how to learn words for early readers, for literacy diagnosis. But how about naman for the higher readers, just like for us, and also for advanced readers? Actually, for them, they have enrichment activities by which they can expose themselves, then they are capable of self-learning. As by having them rich text materials, then they can learn on their own. Their knowledge and vocabulary is very wide. So that's how we teach them, through having enrichment activity. Okay, so reading is to the mind as exercise is to the body. Okay. Okay, so we're going to have the weaknesses in decoding. Okay, so we're done about the strengths in decoding. For the strengths, we know it's all about the text, the use of phonemes with the letters, the graphemes. We also have the words association, the morphemes. But you know what? Although it brings a lot of benefits, but for decoding also has weaknesses. Okay? That's why it leads to anxiety or part of the students that they don't want to read. And we know that we encounter students not reading, right? So something na nabuo nila from the earlier stage, tapos nagmanifest, nag-grow until they reach this stage. Kung kailan sila grade 6, grade 7, di pa rin sila marunong magbasa. Okay? Because they really have problems. And for us, no, especially for primary teachers, they are really the informative years of students. They must learn the prerequisite skills for learning because they cannot learn for the next steps. Just like of a ladder, right? It's so hard to jump to the next step without undergoing the usual process. And para bang you're in the first floor, you want to jump on the second floor without a ladder. It's really difficult. For us teachers, our task is to make that ladder for them to reach the second floor. And that is what we call the next level. Okay? That's why students are really, in despair, hopeless situations na they don't really understand the thing because they don't have, they haven't given enough exercise to practice reading. Okay? And one of the things or one of the events is the weakness in decoding. Okay? What is a decoding difficulty? So as we can see here in the figure, we have the student. Okay? This one is in the neutral phase, also this student. Then some student who has an angry face. Right? So as you can see, the difficulty, the reading the text, because no matter how he reads or she reads the materials many times, it does not lead to understanding. Okay? So what is a decoding difficulty? It is a child can only decode text with greater than 90% accuracy when the texts are significantly below grade level. Okay? Then the reader's comprehension is negatively impacted by decoding struggles because they don't have the enough words, right? They have deficient vocabulary. So that holds them to understand the thing. This specifically the text. Therefore, pag ganon na situation, they don't understand the text, they cannot create mental image, right? So they cannot undergo imagination. So the students' motivation, engagement, or overall school performance is negatively impacted by decoding problems. Okay? So pag ganun, they are state of hopelessness. They don't want to stand a thing. Therefore, it's learned helplessness. So the students felt helpless because they don't really understand the thing. And we don't want that thing to happen for students that they lost motivation, because if the student lost motivation from the very start, then everything comes after will go into ruin. So they will not learn something. So everything is a domino effect. Okay? Now, what we're going to do as teachers, as tasks, we have to do diagnosis. That's why we have the literacy diagnosis. Okay? Identify the needs assessment, the needs of students for this matter or situation. We can adjust them properly so that we know how to react, right? How to address the situation at the early stages. Because if it lingers on that stage that they have difficulty in reading and we don't address that as teachers, they learned helpless, they felt hopeless, therefore it ruins everything. It ruins the learning. Okay, so we need to identify, so what are the causes of decoding difficulties? First of all, we have, you know, we're not isolated by the fact that we have the vision or hearing problems. Okay, why hearing problems? They don't know how to spell or to say a word. Therefore, if they don't know, where they're not familiar with words, they have difficulty in reading. And also for the vision. Okay, for the vision, something that they don't read, right? So they cannot read also. So if a child is not perceiving spoken or written words accurately, this can result in decoding difficulties. So it's about the physiological, biological perspective of the child in learning. So he has difficulty, malfunctions in the body, especially for the eyes and the hearing. So therefore, that impedes or halts the learning process. Okay, what are we going to do? So this is, we have special education centers if that's the worst case scenario. But if we just like but if we can address the situation, hearing aid, but for vision, we have to use eyeglasses. Okay, there are some students even in the elementary stages talaga na they have lost vision or they have poor eyesight. So causes, so limited access to literacy and language experiences, and the home or lack of preschool. So this one, they haven't been exposed to words and also to phrases. That's why, teachers, it's important to have a play with a child because this will widen their perspective on things. They can communicate because we have here that so-called the social learning. So for the social learning, they have the interactions not only to parents but also to their students or to their classmates. So also for the physical, the fine motor, the gross motor skills are refined, and their talk or interaction improves their what communication skills and widen their vocabularies. So some children struggle with decoding and simply due to lack of prior language and literacy experiences. So it's really the matter for us teachers to really expose the students with experiences. That's why experience comes with learning. Okay, so ayan. So the causes of decoding difficulties, educational gaps. So if a child moves on one or more times during his early years in school, he may miss out on certain instructional opportunities. If a child misses school due to illness or neglect, this can also lead to decoding difficulties. So for the difficulties, educational gaps, ayun nga po sa napag-iiwanan sa pag-aaral. So if they don't have the proper education, it's so hard for them to comprehend the word. Okay? So this one, we need to standardize everything to make to make learning fruitful for students by exposing them to educational scenarios or educational settings. Kasi when education is halted or obstructed, definitely the coding strategies or reading strategies are not improved, are not refined, are not practiced. Therefore, understanding is difficult. Okay? Decoding difficulties. Okay? That's why no matter what the cost, for elementary years, for primary schooling, that's the informative years. Then we mean to say that it's compulsory also for all students to do in the elementary. But if you can go to higher level, why not? If you really have the opportunity, don't lose track pa rin naman. Okay? So causes of learning difficulties, we also have attention problems. Especially for us at homes, or if a child cannot focus her attention an individual letters, word patterns, chunks, decoding will be difficult for him. It may be having two parts pa rin. It may be physiologic or the biological part by which the students cannot focus. Or for environmental, so there are some situations, so for example, it's just a confined area, marami sila nandun sa isang bahay, so the students cannot study. So if that's the case, there is really an attention problem. Okay? Now, what we're going to do, we have to control the environment of students that is suitable for learning. Okay? So, talaga, no? It's very vital talaga, no matter what the case we are in, that we have the supporting framework for the child's development. It's a really, really crucial thing. Okay? That we have the attention problems. Causing of the decoding difficulties, we have the language deficit, somehow related with the poor literacy. If they don't have the poor literacy understanding, so they have deficiency when it comes to learning words or phrases, so therefore they have the language deficit. So it struggles something like correct word or order. Understanding language can also interfere with their decoding. So if a child doesn't know what sounds right, then monitoring self-correct can become more difficult. So it's really important that in the early stages, we corrected. No, it's just like using prevention is better than cure. Okay, by making students to learn at the early stages, correct something at the early stages before it becomes rampant or difficult to alter. So that means for the cure. Okay, so we always advocate for prevention is better than cure. If we can just decode, we have the early diagnosis before it becomes apparent, it becomes difficult for us to alter. So we have to do that. Okay. So decoding difficulties, we have motivation. That's the last part actually. No? If they have problems with reading, then they don't understand the thing, they lost motivation. We don't want the students to feel helpless in a situation. Okay? That motivation is really a matter for students. If they really have the drive to do something for their learning, they really want to do it on their own. And for us to make the motivation intrinsic for them is for us to expose them to beautiful things that will let them realize the beauty of reading. And that means the motivation. But if they are exposed to barren areas, a barren situation, and they don't have something to talk, somebody to talk to about this thing, tapos they found hopeless and helpless, they lost motivation, so learned helplessness na po ang tawag. So therefore motivation. So difficult home situations, what are the causes for that? We have the prior negative school experiences or lack of positive experiences, which can lead to low motivation. That's why for teachers, it's really important to have the supporting framework with students. Kasi, the tongue has its power to alter, to bite a thing. Okay? What I mean to say is, yung sa students kasi, they are very sensitive and they will carry that through their lifetime. Kapag sinabihan silang ang nila, very slow sila, they have this, what they call this, the effect on them. That's the halo effect. That they will carry that on their side. Okay, mahina pala ako, so I want to play with that with words. Sometimes there are two options if the students will take that positively or negatively. If they take it positively, they will learn to improve. But if students are taking your comments negatively, so they will just do it because you mentioned to them. Okay? So, yun nga po. It's either it has positive or negative impact to students. That's really motivation. Okay, so thank you so much. We're already done with the weaknesses, but I want to have this question. What are the other challenges that you will encounter in teaching literacy decoding online? So aside from what are the causes of decoding difficulties such as motivation, hearing problems, vision problems, language deficits, etc., what are some of the challenges that you will encounter in teaching literacy online? You can comment your questions in here so that we can. Okay. So for us, no. So we know about the strengths and weaknesses. Now is our part as teachers. Okay. For us teachers, how can we intervene to help students with decoding difficulties? Kasi we don't want kasi na to leave the person hanging. Para bang it's just like pag-iwan sa ere tapos walang sasalo sa kanya. For us to leave the students hanging is a mortal sin. No? But for us to catch the falling short student will make the learning even or redirected to right path or lead. Okay, so this one we have, how can we intervene? First, we have to analyze the child's decoding errors to determine what the child is doing well. That's why we have the form of assignments, right? And also the practice exercises. Kasi first thing talaga, we have to model. Second, we have the guided practice. Second, third one, we have the independent practice. But more or less, we spend much time with the guided practice. That's what the picture tells us. Okay, so we have here the teacher, right? Then the teacher guides the students on how to write. So we focus about 60% of our teaching with the guided practice. And that's the way on how can we intervene with students with learning difficulties and also with decoding difficulties. Okay, so teacher specific reading strategies based upon my analysis of the child's recording error. For you as teachers, you know your students well, so definitely you can learn how to address the situation. Okay, so provide practice with appropriate phonological awareness, teach relevant phonic patterns and high frequency words. So use to make them learn something or the words from the usual conversation. You have to teach them the common words in a conversation, right? And the usual thing. Okay, so and create opportunities for the child to read and reread as many texts as possible. It all boils down with the so-called practice, and for the practice makes perfect thing, right? We know that practice is really important. It may not be perfect at the first time, but still it may be gotten perfect for second time, third time, fourth time, and even 100 times. So, ganun lang siya. Okay? So, we really have to pay attention. That's why for being a teacher, it's really important that we have patience because, for children, they're not quick learners. Some are really fast learners. Some are really slow learners, very fast learners, quick learners, very slow, and even with learning disabilities or problems. But for us, that's our task, no? To make our students feel hopeful of a situation. We are here as guides for students to make them understand the thing or matter, so that for us, guided practice is really important. Okay? So I hope that you learned something from our role as teachers. By the way, I just want to share this one that I have online. If you really want to expand your thing, or how to teaching reading to students, you can visit this website or link. So teaching all students to read, practices from reading for schools with strong intervention and outcomes. Why we just only focus on the um, preschoolers or the grade schoolers? Kasi we know that is the foundation of all learning. So kapag nagkamali po tayo, sorry to say, pag nagkamali po tayo dito sa first informative years ng students, then high school, college, and even for a lifetime, wala na talaga. So, dapat po talaga in the first grade level pa lang or early stages pa lang, talagang magagaling na po yung mga teachers natin for reading. And also, not only for teaching, but also detecting diagnosis, detecting disabilities, detecting difficulties in reading. Okay? So, ayan. So, you can have this one. You can browse this one to read about this teaching reading thing so that learning will be successful. And you know, for reading kasi it encompasses all aspects. It's not only academic, but they want to, if they really want to look for something or they really want to do something on their own, they can just read, right? So it's not about having for academic matters that, but they can also use the skills for work situations, for real life situations. Okay. Okay, so I just want to share this quote according to Alvin Toffler. Okay, to end. So the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So meaning to say that we're for this, it's just a foundation that we have to read and write. But we know we are progressing in this world that it's not about reading and writing, but it's about learning and relearning and unlearning. Okay? So something that we really have to keep pace with the challenges for us to make students learn how to read and write, to make their skills exceptional and um, even glorified or even fruitful for the years to come in their life. Okay, and that is really our task as teachers, to make them successful. We have to establish the foundations of learning. Okay. By the way, so these are my references for my teaching. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to questions and clarifications in my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Glenn. So we'll proceed with the question and answer po. We have some questions here from our viewers. The first one is from Miss Mortega Nenita. How can we help really those students who are struggling so much in reading in spite of various strategies we provide them?
For this one, I don't believe with the endless cycle. What do you mean for this? There are various means or ways. We just have to bank on students' learning styles. That's the first thing, and also the multiple intelligence. Sometimes kasi it's para bang ang the more thing that is beneficial is for the language or linguistic or verbal learners. But how about for those students who are struggling with reading, but they have to learn something using kinesthetic or music style, naturalistic intelligence? So if that is the case, we have to bank or to tailor or to fit our teaching strategies for making our students learn about the reading strategies or the reading and also or eventually the literacy. Okay, so for us teachers, is our really our task to exploit all means possible despite various strategies, right? So we need to innovate something really, not just innovate, we have to be inventive. Okay, so in doing things right for our students. So there are many cases. So first thing, yun nga po, as mentioned, we have the learning styles, multiple intelligences. We have also the practice, and we have to confer with parents. And we know naman for parents, siguro for the students, we need to give activities that support because we cannot just attend to one student, but we are attending to a lot of students in a class and another class also. So we really have to pay attention with it. So exhaust all means. Okay. It's not about the teachers alone, but also the partnership of the parents and students. Okay. Then they can also use the internet also to view materials. For example, for reading materials, for phonemes, morphemes, ayon, through exposure to learning environment. So if that things add, if those events add up, so may eventually little by little, it's still progressing. Okay? So hindi naman tayo aabot sa point na wala talaga siyang natutunan until he or she reaches this stage. So for example, maging 20 years old na siya, hindi naman siya totally wala talagang natutunan as readers. Okay?
Thank you so much, sir, for answering that question. Let's proceed po with Mr. Edward Diaz's question. What are some of the interventions for a dyslexic child encountering decoding difficulties?
Hello po, yes.
Again po, sir, the question is from Mr. Edward Diaz. What are some of the intervention for a dyslexic child encountering decoding difficulties?
Okay. So we mean to say for the dyslexia kasi it's a learning disability and it involves about difficulty in learning words, reading and spelling. But I believe that the special education teachers have really the strategies for that. Okay, they are really designed to teach a specific student having that kind of problem. Now, kasi for the schools, we practice the so-called inclusive education. We mean to say we don't want the students to be left behind the scenes, so they are in the mainstream classroom, just like in blending with the ordinary kids, right? That's why. But for this one, we want to seek help. No? First thing, we really have to seek help on how to um, cater or accommodate this kind of student. Okay? Kasi this one is really, it's not about the teacher thing because it also has physiological changes or matters that fit to their designed behavior. Okay, so meaning to say, there are really matters or teaching strategies that is important to them. Now, what we're going to do if they are just included in the mainstream classroom, maybe we provide interventions or customized activity for that student. So also provide separate materials per student. If you have time, also undergo one-on-one, something like that. So, yun, it's really hard talaga, to be honest. But this one, it really matters and really pays the worth of something if we are successful in dealing with that. We are successful in dealing with that. So, seeking the parental support, the psychological support, yung sa um, doctor support if the person, the child has um, consultant with that. So, yeah, those are the things that we have to consider. It's not about the strategies on teaching, but it's about the way of teaching. What I mean is yung fitted teaching methodologies for students with learning disabilities. Okay?
Thank you po, sir. For our last question is from Miss Jocelyn Prades. Question po, sir. How are we going to help learners with decoding difficulties in distance learning setting, especially in the public school system?
Yeah, I'm also thinking with that because for public system, we cannot monitor students because we're not in the physical setup. Second, it's a modular. learning. Third, we have the parents support, parental learning, the important role of parents this time of pandemic. Okay, so this one for the learning difficulties, no, I think we have live sessions or recorded sessions that students can access anytime, anywhere. Okay, then also that's the first thing, no, it's not about the undergoing strict academic control. Okay, so it's about having or immersing that child with learning difficulty or decoding difficulty into environment or to situations in real life. Okay, second thing naman, for this time, maybe we can confirm also with parents. Kasi yun lang kasi, di ba? So siguro we first as teachers, we have to fit a material for that kind of student. Then we confer with parents on how to teach that or how to facilitate that. So that the same time, namomonitor na rin ni parents and also ni teacher. Okay? So we may not be able to see the student in online, lalo na in far-flung areas. So that's really hard. No? So the only thing that we can confer to is actually the parent. Okay? Tapos, from that needs assessment, we can tailor fit in nga po. We can tailor fit our assessment. Okay? We advocate the idea that one size does not fit all. Okay? So, hindi po tayo uniform, hindi po tayo kung ito effective sa isa, ito naman magiging expected sa lahat. No. It's that's the kasi advocacy, no? So, our concept is one size does not fit all. So, students have learning styles, students have multiple intelligences. So, pag ganun po, we just have to identify first the various means we can confer with parents. Second, for students, ano ba yung mga interests or skills niya? Kung saan siya mas nag-excel. Maybe for dance, pwede siyang gumawa ng ganito, ng song, ganyan. Tapos isasayaw niya, interpretative dance. Kapag naman musical naman siya inclined, dapat gumawa siya ng ganito. Something poem, etc., literacy, etc. So those are the things. We can confirm with parents, identify the needs assessment, then we have to fit the material for students. So that's the best thing that we can do. Kasi even though for us, we extend kasi, for us teachers, we extend professional work kasi. So we are not directly supervising students, but we are the ones supervising the parents to guide their children. Kasi. So, yun na po yung new normal thing natin for online distance learning.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions of our viewers. That's all the questions that we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers today, sir?
Okay, so for the learning difficulties, I know it's really hard for us um, to change the landscape of education, but we are still in this age, and there's no point of turning back. Okay? So, ayun lang po. So, shout out nga pala by Teacher Girly Fajardo and also Jex Rico. And for other personnels and teachers and friends watching the live session, so I hope that you learned something for today and also my colleague. Okay? Then, ayun lang po, for teachers all over the country, all over the world, no? I hope that you are doing well, fine in this challenging time. So I hope that what you have learned for today will be affected not not just abruptly but gradually to your learners. At muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong pakikinig at naway ako'y nakabahagi ng kaalaman sa inyong karanasan bilang guro. Maraming salamat.
There we have it. In behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank you, sir, for being our speaker this afternoon for this insightful learning session. It is truly an honor to have you with us today, sir. And to all our Vibal viewers, all thanks to you for your continuous patronage to our daily learning session. We do encourage you to subscribe and watch on our official Vibal Facebook page and YouTube channel. Muli maraming salamat at magkita-kita po tayo uli bukas sa another batch ng ating live learning session. Maraming salamat at magandang araw sa ating lahat. Stay safe everyone. Goodbye!